Back in 1890, Edward Armstrong created FM radio, and little did he know that this would be the worldwide way of listening to radio still in the 2020s. It's me, Chris Waring, and today's special episode of One Man and His Blog features on the FM radio situation in the UK. How you can still listen to your favourite radio stations even though they're seemingly changing all over the place.
Biggest throwbacks. I got a feeling.
This is Apple FM.
So as you know, One Man and His Blog is going to feature a lot of different things. It's not just bike-related stuff. If you're not into sort of listening to my voice, which a lot of people aren't going to be, there are plenty of videos still on the channels that you can watch. But you are, if you are interested really in the state of UK radio especially, or you want to find out sort of what's happened, because a lot of changes have gone on in the past few years, keep watching. There's not going to be a lot of videos. Some of you may say I've got the perfect face for radio. Well, I have. This is one of my many strings to my bow. I absolutely love doing radio-related content. A little bit of a brief history on my radio career. It's something I started when I left college at the age of 18. I was very fortunate enough to go and volunteer at several local radio stations, one of them being Rock FM and Magic 999 as they were called in those days. More on those guys later. And steadily worked my way up as what they call a technical operative, and then a producer, and then finally I got into the presenting and basically covered a lot of shows across the northwest, and came out of it really because the money wasn't that great, and a guy that was in his early 20s sort of needed some money to live. So that's the reason why I put it on the back burner till around 6 years ago now, where I discovered something called community radio, and we're going to go into depth in that as well during this show today. So keep watching. I'm going to hit you with a load of information, and hopefully it will answer a few questions during the course of the next few minutes or so. In the UK, we have a split now of three different types of FM stations. We're going to feature on the FM stations today because AM is slowly being made obsolete, especially for music-based stations, because the quality just isn't there. There is also digital radio stations which can also have an FM frequency as well, and a lot of big national broadcasters such as the BBC and commercial radio stations do have both. But in terms of radio stations, they're split into three main categories. We've got BBC radio, both national and local. We've got commercial radio, again, both national and local. And we've got community-based stations, which, as the name suggests, is community-based. It's local radio. And it's really what local radio is right here in 2023 in the UK. Let's touch on those very quickly. So we've got the BBC stations. Of course, you've got your national BBC radio stations. They're Radio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got the Asian network and several other stations as well. What you may not know about BBC local radio stations in the UK, they are just in England. Scotland, Ireland and Wales have a couple of national local radio stations, if that makes sense. So there's BBC Radio Cymru, there's BBC Radio Scotland, of course for Scotland. I think there is BBC Radio Ulster and BBC Radio Foyle, I think it's called, for Northern Ireland listeners. So when I'm talking about BBC local radio stations, I'm focusing on the 39 radio stations there are at the moment, and there's big changes coming to the BBC network because their local programming will still only air from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. on weekdays. And then will be 18 regional shows instead of the 39 regional shows between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. Going forward. So there is massive changes within the BBC coming. Not that you'll follow it really, because they're not going to make a big song and dance about it. This is being brought into the media. Weekend is going to be very similar. The number of weekend daytime shows is going to reduce to 18. Now, remember, there's 39 local radio stations, so there's going to be shared content between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. That's going to be on Saturday and Sunday mornings. So there's just a load of changes coming in at the BBC. And the reason I mention this, because people are getting very, very passionate about what is local now. And I did mention Rock FM and Magic 999 before, and they were based in Preston. If anybody knows about these radio stations and they know the location, it was based in a converted church. It was just a magnificent building. It still is. It no longer houses those radio stations, though. And this is what's happening in a lot of commercial radio these days. Like I said, commercial radio is split into two main categories, I suppose. We've got your national radio stations that are commercial, and what I mean is very similar to all your commercial TV channels out there. And then we've got your regional radio stations, which are also commercial, or your local radio stations, which are also commercial. And they are a dying breed. And it's because these are being taken over now by big companies, big media companies, and there's nothing wrong with that, because it's saving that content and it's saving, in a way, some jobs. Unfortunately, it's also costing a lot of jobs, and one of the results of that was that the content from Rock FM now is actually produced down in Manchester. And if you know local geography, that's around sort of 40 miles away from Preston. I wouldn't say that's personally very local. And I find that quite sad in a way that has happened, that a city the size of Preston has lost its massive commercial station, which was huge in the 80s and 90s. It's a massive, it was a massive part of life for the town it was at that point. And it just saddens me that that's now gone. I'm going to use an example. And I'm not going to pick on this particular company, because I think what Global do as a media group is fantastic in a lot of ways. It's brought a lot of music to the forefront that you may not have been able to do so through a medium which, let's face it, is still free in the UK here in 2023 at the moment. So Heart is the name of a British local radio network and brand of 13 contemporary music stations here in the UK. So they're going to play pop music from the 80s right through to the present day. And you will have noticed, as time has gone on, over the past 10 years, Heart has massively expanded. In fact, they started back in September 1994 in the Midlands, and they became the third independent regional radio station. 1994, that's nearly 30 years ago, consider. Now, Heart was a standalone brand at the time, and it did its own thing. And as time went on, and we're fast forwarding way forward now to just 13 years ago, to 2010, Global Radio had started rebranding a lot of their local radio stations they bought, and it affected one of mine in a station called Coast 96.3. And Champion 103 as well, with their sister station. They were based in Bangor in North Wales, and it was a station that I did a lot of work for back in the early noughties to the mid noughties. And there's a guy that is still heavily involved in commercial radio today, Steve Sims. And if Steve is watching this, I've got to say a massive thank you for all the support he showed me back in those days to actually get me on air, because that was a massive thing for me. But they started rebranding all these little local radio stations as Heart. So it would have been Heart North Wales, for instance. I'm just looking down my list now. And then what they did in 2010 was they merged the majority of the 33 Heart stations to create a smaller network, and literally overnight nearly halved the number to 18. And basically they closed buildings, because of course all these little radio stations had their own broadcast area. So for instance, we'll use Heart North Western Wales, which was this merged station in September 2010, and that included Heart North Wales Coast, which was the station I've been just talking about now. We've got Heart Cheshire and Heart North East Wales and Heart Wirral. So there is in fact 5 stations all amalgamated into this one Heart North Western Wales station based in one building. So overnight they got rid of 4 buildings and 4 buildings worth of staff in one fell swoop. And this happened up and down the country. Remember, they had to reduce from 33 to 18. So we've gone from these little local radio stations selling local advertising, talking about local things in North Wales and bringing you local news to North Wales, to content that was mainly based out of Wrexham, again in North Wales, not too far away, just along the A55, but not as local as it should be. And, Heart Cymru moved its studios to Wrexham, so that was the Welsh-speaking station, commercial radio station, the Welsh-speaking commercial radio station, something that is I think it's actually gone these days. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section, but I think sadly Champion 103, the station that was Champion 103, is sadly no more, and has just been amalgamated into what was Heart, North West and Wales. We'll come to that in a little while. But there was more changes to come, unfortunately, for those listeners to Heart who stayed with the station. Because fast forward 8.5 years, Ofcom, who is the Office of Communications for the UK, decided to relax local content obligations. And what they mean by that is there has to be so many hours of local radio broadcast from a radio station each day. So you've got two types of shows, and there's a lot of subcategories which I'm not going to go into, but you've got two types. You've got your live show, which is what you'd expect. It's like watching breakfast on the TV. That's a live show. That's as it happens. There is also pre-recorded content as well. So there's two main areas here. There is live local content and live syndicated content. And a syndicated show is something that can be either live or pre-recorded, but is broadcast to multiple radio stations. The live ones are broadcast, of course, at the same time. A live local show would be only broadcast to that one radio station, if that made any sense. Okay, and in February 2019, so 8.5 years after these massive changes swept through Heart, reducing the number of stations to these regional stations instead of local stations, they said they would replace their local breakfast and weekend shows with additional network programming from London. Now, I'm sat in wherever I am. North Wales, for instance. I've been a Coast 96.3 listener. I've come along with the rebrand to Heart, and it's not too bad. And I love, I eat my cereal having the radio on, or driving to work with having Heart on, knowing it'd be a local breakfast show. And they then said they would replace their local breakfast and weekend show. So this reduced the local weekly programming on each station. I'm talking in hours here, and sit down and brace yourself, from 43 hours to just 15. And this obliterated jobs within this company, again, in a very short period of time. Drive time output, what I mean by drive time, it usually broadcasts between around 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. within that window. So your drive home from school or work. That was reduced from 23 localised shows to just 10, and that was covering enlarged areas with a merger of Heart stations, and 10 studios producing local programming were closed. Localised news, traffic updates and advertising, though, was retained to keep it that local feel. In a smoke and mirrors way that I feel in 2019 we should not have been doing in media. There was an awful lot of controversy with radio competitions not so long back, basically not being clear. You will listen to a radio competition now and there will be so many terms and conditions on there that it takes up most of the feature, because you are, as a listener, allowed to know how that competition is working, and it's quite right. As I said, breakfast became a national thing on Heart back in April 2019, so just 2 months after this was announced. And it started in London. It's got two very talented presenters in Jamie Theakston and Amanda Holden, which many of you will know from TV. And this is what Heart have started to do. They have started to put celebrities onto the radio. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but do you listen to the radio to see your favourite celebrity, or listen to your local favourite celebrity, or do you listen for the music? Because I'm personally the latter. I don't know. So this is what was going on in Heart all of 4 years ago. And again, I'm not picking on Heart solely. This has happened across Global. This happened across Bauer as a media group as well. So there has been a lot of changed, going on. All right. So don't think I'm bashing Heart here and bashing Global, because I'm not. I'm just using them as an example. I can't even find details on now of where the Welsh Heart Network are that I was talking about. I can tell you now that Heart West Country, or where I am, is now within Heart West. And that stretches from Gloucestershire down to Wiltshire, into the southwest corner, so Cornwall, and across the West Country as well. So we're now a huge regional station as a result of that. And, I think there's going to be more changes to come. There's been a lot of criticisms to what Heart have done. There's been a lot of people not liking the merger, which was brought on by Ofcom relaxing the rules. But, this is where the money is, and they've got to keep these stations going. As I said, they have reduced drastically over the years, but there are still radio stations open in major conurbations across the UK, keeping jobs within the media. And that's surely a good thing. So we've discovered already that the BBC are merging their local radio stations into more regional radio stations, which is copying a format very much like Heart. And their content will change, unfortunately, over the coming years. So the question begs from you guys, when you were listening to your radio growing up and your favourite local presenter broadcasting from your town or city was on, where do I get that in 2023? Is there somewhere I can get that in 2023? And this now comes full circle for me. I came out of radio in the mid-noughties. As I said, for personal reasons, I needed a paid job that was proper, that was good. I was travelling up and down the northwest of England. The pay in radio at the time wasn't brilliant, and therefore I was actually coming out at the end of the month with a loss in all the petrol I was spending to get to these jobs. That is not a good thing, guys. And it really did affect my mental health at the time, although I didn't really know it. Fast forward around 12 years, and I've now moved to Exmoor in Devon, and I love the fact that I'm still excited about radio and music, and I needed an outlet. So step in now, community radio stations, and these are springing up and down the country. And this is something I'm really passionate and excited about, because this is bringing back local radio, and it is micro-focusing it as well. And what I mean by that is, a city, we'll use Bristol as the example for being local, is huge now. And they would have a station like GWR, I think, Great Western Radio, covered a whole area, it covered Bath as well. Now you can micro broadcast in your favourite community. Such a diverse city as Bristol has so many cultures that require being broadcast to, I feel, and this is so important in 2023, and now you can do it. And this is the amazing thing. So all these little community radio stations that are popping up are taking on the mantle of your local radio stations back in the 80s, 90s and early noughties. And what's more, not only are they bringing talent through from the local community, they're also bringing back presenters that were on those radio stations at the time, because they may have lost their jobs with all these shake-ups within Global and Bauer. They may have been alienated to a point where they didn't want to do this anymore and needed some security, which is totally fair enough. And now, something that many people volunteer for, that's the sort of ethos of community radio, that it's a voluntary thing. It's the best comparison I can find for it is something like hospital radio. In this country, we have an institution which is hospital radio. You used to go into hospital before the days of mobile phones and all the technology that's come along with it, and not have a lot to entertain you. You may have 4 or 5 TV channels if you were lucky, and a few radio stations. And the hospital radio's main aim was to basically cheer the patients up within the hospital and go round once a week and collect requests of these patients. And it's such a simple concept, but it worked so well. And several of these radio stations now have gone from broadcasting just within the boundaries of their particular hospital to broadcasting across their area. And as a result, they can now become community interest companies, which is called a CIC, a bit like a limited company. If you see the letters LTD next to something, that's a limited company. If you see the letters CIC next to something, that is a community interest company. And in short, what that allows them to do is not only raise money as a charity, but also raise money through commercial means as well. And that commercial means in radio, in commercial radio, of course, means advertising. And you can find your favourite community radio stations anywhere you live. They can be in the smallest town or village, right up to the biggest city. Of course, the bigger the place, the more choice you're going to get. So you're going to find something broadcasting which interests you. And it's not just on your standalone radio at home. These radio stations are now all over FM, so you can get them in your car where you work. There's some very exciting developments coming in the next 12 months or so with community-based digital radio, which is going to be huge. And you go on some of the websites of these community-based radio stations, they've got as many features as your big players have, because they've got things like you can listen live online, you can listen again to the past 30 days worth of content, you can message the radio station even. So all these things that the big players were doing back in the 90s and the noughties are now coming round to smaller radio stations. And I would urge you, once you've watched this video, and there's not much of it left, and thank you for sticking with it this long, to discover a community radio station in your area. If you're in Taunton Deane, we've got a couple of them. There is going to be one I particularly feature on because, again, it's very close to me, and that is 97.3 Apple FM. DJ Yuki and Kate Wilde. It's called Chances. It's such a massive tune on Friday Anthems. How are you doing? It's me, Chris Webb. And if you want to... It's 97.3 Apple FM. Loads of you have been in contact tonight saying, Chris, you sound a bit nasally this week. I've got the cold again that keeps on giving, the one that I seem to have had since the start of 2023. You listened to Friday Anthems last night, especially the retro mix. We had a load of remixes. I've done it again. Shade featuring Zayn, Joel Corey on the remix of Trampoline, and this in the background, Axwell and Ingrosso's Dreamer. There's Jack Wins doing them a favour on this as well, and it's sounding so good. Sarah Jane's in Willardton tonight. Hello to you. Colin's in Holloway. He is just listening on the app before he has to go out somewhere. Asher, hello to you. Back. You're in Moulton Heathfield. Broadcasting for 3 hours a week on 2 shows, on a Friday and Saturday night. I will put the links to them in the description below. This is not a video about me. It's a video giving information to you guys watching it. And it's given me my love for radio back without looking over my shoulder, without thinking, is this going to be my final show on the station? Can I afford to put petrol in my car this week? Am I going to get another gig this week to cover my costs? It's not about that now. It's about the love and it's about the broadcasting. So when I said at the top of this video, yeah, I've got a face for radio, I definitely have. And I'm back into it now, and I'm heavily involved in Apple FM, and hopefully 2023 will see the radio station go from strength to strength. So if you're in the Taunton Deane area, look out for us. I would really love if you clicked down on our Facebook page and our Instagram and also our Twitter. I'll try and remember to put the links to our socials below, but if you don't, or if I don't, sorry, just search out Apple FM Taunton in Google or whatever whatever social media is your favourite, and I would really appreciate if you gave that a like. If you put your like into them instead of putting a like into this video, it'd be even better. So I hope that's just explained things to you a little bit more clearly. I'm not saying what the BBC and Global are doing is wrong. I'm saying that a lot of people are looking for local content. They're interested in what's going on in their local area. And not a lot of people know about these community radio stations yet. So hopefully this video has opened your eyes to something new. And if you want to try something new, just flick around your FM dial till you find something you don't recognise. Give it a listen. Maybe type it into Google and find out more about the station and give them your love and support, because 9 times out of 10 the person you're listening to on the other end of the radio is doing that because they want to and they're not getting paid for it. So give them some love. Hopefully, as I said, that's answered a few questions. Not bike related content this time. That may be coming back next time. Thank you so much for watching One Man and His Blog. Take care, and I'll catch you real soon.